Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to share my story with everyone and hope that something sparks in you and inspires you to do something that you never thought you could do. So the theme for this talk is really close to me because it really resonates with my whole life. When Sarah told me the theme is, your zip code doesn't determine your destiny. And to me, that's really true. I mean, your zip code doesn't really determine your destiny. It's what you make of it. Now, what does that really mean? So let's just talk about what zip code is. I think of it as a physical zip code and a mental zip code. The physical boundaries that hold you in and the mental boundaries that hold you in. So what is a physical boundary that sometimes keeps us from pushing forward? Could be our family, our circumstance, where we're born, and maybe we don't have enough resources to go and do what we want. And from those physical boundaries, we form our mental boundaries. It develops this fear of the unknown, the fear of not wanting to push the boundaries or tip the balance, so to say, to really follow what you are passionate about, or even have the courage to figure out what your passion is. We get into this loop of negativity and this loop of we can't do something, or this loop of I don't think I can do it, I'm not good enough. And those are the zip codes that I would like to talk about. The mental and the physical invisible fences that we hold ourselves in. And that's what I talk about a lot with my friends and families. The invisible fence, our mental, or the boundaries that we don't see. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I come from and how I push through some boundaries, or every boundary that I've been faced with. I was born to a 16-year-old mother. She was married at 15 and had me right after. She and I have less of a gap than me and my youngest brother. So she was still in school when she had me. And I hear the story and it breaks my heart every time, that when my father's mom came to visit, because back then, they couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl. When she saw that the baby was a girl, she rejected me because I was a girl, and also because I was dark-skinned. Because in India, fair skin is much more preferred than darker-skinned people. So here I am. I grew up with this story. Everybody tells me this, and it breaks my heart every single time. So here's my mom, still going to school, has a baby, and her mother-in-law totally abandoned her in helping her. And so she reaches out to her mom and ended up giving me up to her when I was only 3 months old. So I didn't grow up with my parents. I grew up in my maternal grandmother's home, where when I look back today, it was a massive blessing, because those few years that I spent with her, the love that was cultivated in me in those years is what I think drives me forward even to this day. That love that in those initial years. From then on, I grew up. I was 7, and I think it was my father's decision to move me from my love-filled home into a home of my uncle and aunts, his brothers, because traditionally a kid gets spoiled when they're given too much love. And actually, that was exactly their argument. You're getting too spoiled. You need to have discipline. You need to have this. And so they didn't move me into their home. They moved me into my uncle and aunt's home, where I felt like I was never good enough. I always felt that I was treated differently than their son. And I was a girl. And girls aren't really, important in my family, even to this day. And throughout those years, I remember feeling wanted, feeling abandoned, and feeling like I'm missing something. And so when the time came for me to move to the US, where my parents were at that time, I was ecstatic. I couldn't have asked for a better miracle to happen than living with my parents. And when I went to live with my parents when I was, I think, 11 or 12, it was the day I went into heaven. And I got there, and those few years that I stayed there were just full of disappointments, because I expected something different from my parents, and my parents expected something different from me. And we constantly argued and disagreed because we just had so many different expectations of each other. And as you can see, my zip code constantly changed, whether it was physical or mental. There were many times, there was a time when I left home when I was 13, slept on the street, and because I didn't want to go home. I didn't feel home. I didn't feel like they were my parents, because they didn't treat me like my parents. When I came back, or when I was found, because I actually went to a friend's, my family friend's home, because I was knocking on each door that night, should I say. And I ended up at a family friend's home, and I told them, I'll do anything, just do not call my parents. And those mental boundaries that I was constantly pushing, I think everybody struggles with that. And I think my story really started to change when I decided I need to do something on my own. I know I need to live with my parents, and I don't feel at home there. So I needed to cultivate my own life, my own being. And that took time too. Even though I decided that or had the awareness or came into that feeling, that still took a lot of time. I went to college based on what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to be a doctor. Surprise there. And even though I went to school for biochem, and later on went on to being a scientist for a big pharma company, it didn't make them happy. I just could not get any approval from my parents. Even though I had decided that I'm going to make my own path, I was still longing for their approval. So always pushing beyond my mental boundaries, my physical boundaries. I think I remember that day very clearly when I decided I do not want to work at this pharmaceutical company anymore. I do not want to be a scientist. I needed to push past another boundary. So what did I do? I quit my job. I went into waiting tables. I went into taking acting classes. I went into working insurance, to retail, to the food industry, and until I could find something that I was passionate about. To go from a 6-figure job to waiting tables, which is great. The things that acting and restaurant business taught me was how to connect with people. It really made me feel like home. It made me connect with my emotions, with myself. It really helped me be more aware of myself, my feelings. And I think it's that journey is what I was looking for, to go on to find what I want to do. And throughout life, I think there isn't even a second that I would change because of the things that I've gone through is what made me who I am. I think sleeping on the streets, going through Newark when I ran away from home, or when in college, going through relationships with boyfriends that were less than perfect, who were mentally abusive, physically abusive, that also put me out on the street. It was always pushing my mental zip code, my mental boundaries. Oftentimes, we just have trouble finding our own way and believing in ourselves. And I think we need to constantly challenge ourselves. I think we need to constantly be there for ourselves, because ultimately I found home in myself. I didn't find it in somebody. I didn't find it in a specific zip code. I didn't find it anywhere except my own being. And I think when I think of this theme, I think people need to, when they are struggling, instead of asking the question, why am I going through it? Why is this happening to me? Ask and be curious about, what am I supposed to learn from this? And I think those are the questions I constantly asked myself. Like, why? What is the question? What is the learning ground? I'm going through this right now, but what is it that I'm supposed to learn from this? I learned how to survive in my childhood when I was tossed around from home to home. I learned how to stand up for myself when I had the courage to quit my job and go on to the unknown of acting, waiting tables, insurance, retail, whatever it is, whatever it took to get me to where I am today. I think that's what we need to do more of. We need to find that courage in ourselves. And it wasn't easy. I mean, I had a lot of challenges, but I think it's also, when you're going through these challenging times, it's also very important to find your tribe, find that connection with people that are constantly going through things that you might be going through. And it's really important for you to find that tribe, find those people, and realize that you're not in this alone. There's so many people who are going through what I went through, and I only knew about that when I started talking. And my family had constantly pushed down being emotional in general. They don't recognize emotion. Even to this day, don't think that, a woman doing something is as important as a man doing something. So I think it's really important for us to share our experiences and find that relief in knowing that there are a lot of people in this with me. And I think that's where I found a lot of my good friends, and also believing in myself throughout this whole journey that I am going to make it. I know that not everybody goes through, the same phase at the same time. I know that not everybody goes through the same things at the same time. But if you just build that connection with other people and share your experiences, I think that's where you find true connection and true being and your true home. Because I think that, you don't necessarily have to be born with a family that you want to be in. You can create your own family. And that's what I've done throughout my life. Collected people, in a way, my friends, and kept them close to me. And that's what has helped me get through to where I am today. Nobody would have thought that a girl who was born in a village that had no water, no toilets, no electricity, that's where I was raised. That's what my grandmother's home was. Would be able to be standing here today in front of you with a fully funded startup with all these experiences under her belt, whether it be acting, whether it be, dealing with the food industry, or whether it be being a scientist, whatever it may be. I never let anybody tell me what to do and what not to do. And that's why the girl from that village is standing in front of you today to try to kind of help you understand that, where you are born, it doesn't dictate where you are going. I hope that my story helps inspire somebody to maybe take a leap of faith or start something new or lessen their fear of the unknown. Because the greatest success to me is to be an inspiration for somebody to do something new and different and daring.